During his tenure as commissioner, the state high school graduation rate has increased to, get this, 90.9%, the highest level. The highest level since states began using a federally mandated methodology for calculating graduation rates in 2011. And more good news, under his leadership, New Jersey is now ranked #1 by Education Week for having the best education system in the country. Dr. Repollet has been a great leader, a great partner, and a great champion for strengthening teaching, leading, and learning, and increasing educational equity for students across New Jersey. Ladies and gentlemen, please help me welcome Dr. Lamont Repollet.
I'm trying to see if I can get situated here. Before I begin, I would like to applaud your work, you and your efforts. I'm going to applaud you. A few weeks ago, we were rated #1 by EdWeek Research Center. We all know EdWeek is a reputable, I'm very happy about that, reputable magazine, and the Research Center is very credible. But a lot of things have been said about me and the state, but I always look at the educators, the practitioners. So I want to say thank you very much for your hard work and dedication. It's important. I've always stated in this position, someone who moved up the ranks, that we have a great workforce. I think at times we may have not gotten credit for that, but we have amazing students and great workforce, and as a result of that, we're rated #1. Well, now, a little secret, I'm very competitive. So when I got on this job, I told my team, and Diana can attest to this, I said, who's #1? We all knew it was Massachusetts, but I wanted to hear it. I said, Massachusetts always #1. What are they doing better than us? I said, well, we're going to beat Massachusetts during my tenure. I didn't realize it was going to be 18, 19 months in that. But it's not about just being #1. It's really about sustaining that. So I hope that we continue doing the things you do on a daily basis, continue advocating for our kids, and also making sure that we provide them an educational experience that's second to none. And if we do that, then we'll continue to be in #1 and sustain, because we are in the top 3 every year. But this is the time for us to commend ourselves and say thank you, because for years in New Jersey, you know, all the ills of society, everything went wrong, whether it's pension, whether it's this, and it always fell on the shoulders of public workers, and more importantly, of educators. So with the governor, that's progressive, and not progressive in the ideas of left and right, but progressive in as far as the growth mindset. He talks about a stronger and fairer New Jersey. So I was just commenting there on the side that I'm a lucky guy. I'm blessed. To be able to lead the Department of Education during the time where a governor is investing in education, where he's all these educational reforms, I get to stand here and be the face of an organization that's doing great work. My predecessors, Kimberly and Hespy, those individuals I talk on a regular basis, they may have been constrained and held back on some of the things they're doing, but our Department of Education, we're not. We're going full steam ahead, so I'm blessed right there. Before, I just want to say good morning to everyone and thank you. I want to thank the A-team. In my head, I call it, because anytime Pat and Donna, they request me to be somewhere, I don't care if I'm passing through, I'll stop for a few minutes. So Pat, Heather, Donna, and Karen, thank you as always for having me come here and address the council, but more so address your members as well. So I'm going to put this away. What's happening at the Department of Education? Today, my team will talk about some of the things that we're doing. We have assessment. We understand that has been one of those things that's been talked about. Our governor talked about from day one moving away from park and transitioning. I think that we have done an admirable job of moving away from park. We've had some challenging roadblocks along the way, whether it's a court case, whether it's our state board. Because remember this, and I've said this publicly, our state board is the previous governor's state board. There has not been a change from this current governor. So the mindset of our state board is still stuck on park is the right way to go is the answer. Assessing our kids, multiple tests, rigor. We know as educators and practitioners, you don't define rigor by the number of assessments that you have. You define rigor by your quality standards, highly effective instruction. That's how we define rigor. So we're going to continue to push the governor's message about moving away from park in a way where it's smart, but more so in a way that we give input from our stakeholders. And I'm very pleased that our outreach has extended to how many, Diana? Probably about 2,000 to 3,000 individuals talking. But more importantly, though, the practitioners having working groups to look at each component of the assessment to say, hey, what is it? Because I've always talked about for us, by us, whether it's professional development, whether it's instruction, whether it's assessment. If New Jersey educators from top to bottom come together, there's nothing that we cannot solve. There's no problem we cannot solve. And I think assessment is one. That's why I'm very happy that the collaboration with not just NJPSA, but other associations on our Connected Action Roadmap. Because as we talk about, the things I talked about from day one is that assessment cycle starts with the standards, it starts with curriculum, and it starts with instruction. But at times, the non-practitioners always go to the outcome, which is the assessment. They always go to the end. But as educators and practitioners, we know that there's a process that must take place. And if we expect to have an intended outcome that we expect, then guess what? We must make sure that the process is done right. So thank you very much for this group and all the other groups of organizations that's coming together with that. So at the convocation, my Southern convocation, I talked about design thinking. So the story I start off with, how do I get to the point of thinking about design? Right, so my daughter is going to school and college, and she wants to be an architect. So now Daddy is going up and down the East Coast, going and visiting school. She's a senior now. So from spring and the summer, it was all about college visits. I sat in many open houses, sat with different departments in architecture. Now, they talked about design, but they talked about the end user. They talked about designing with the outcome in mind. So you know me, I'm like, wow, design. So Governor Murphy is talking about a stronger and fairer New Jersey. So we must create a stronger and fairer educational system. So I can tell you, we just talked about our strength, right? Our workforce, our amazing students, our standards. But let's now concentrate on the fair piece, right? And that fair piece is equity. So this year, the Department of Education will be really focusing on equity in action. And we started that focus in the summertime looking at our Equity for All conference. As I said before, it was for us, by us. Practitioners throughout the state of New Jersey really going and showing their best practices, talking about the success they had with whatever equitable situation, whether it's students with different needs, whether it's academics, whether it's social and emotional. And that was important to start that conversation, to begin that conversation. But it's one thing to talk about equity, right? But it's another thing when you see equity in action. You know, we all saw the picture in the past, the little portrait they had with equality, equity, right? And we all said, that's great. You know, we all have the kids with the little boxes looking over the fence, and you give an extra box. Well, guess we understand those are supports, those are interventions, things that we need to get them on a level playing field, the key word, level playing field. But equity in action is more than just equality and equity. It's also looking at social justice, ensuring that we can remove barriers from our students and our educators and our workforce, make sure we can move those barriers. So some of the things we talk about is diversifying the workforce, right? We all know that diversified staff, and when I talk about diversity, just want to make it very clear that I'm not just talking about black and white. I'm talking about diversity. I'm talking about second career individuals trying to get into the workforce. I'm talking about gender. I'm talking about all that. I'm talking about New Jersey, such a diverse state that that's our strength. The governor talks diversity is our strength. So we can bring our strength into the classrooms, because when you have 56% of your student population is of color and only 16% of color workforce, then that means that we need to balance the scale. We need to level the playing field, as we talk about there. So that's just one example of some of the things we talk about, equity in action. So if you have a goal or you have a plan, you design thinking, right? Design thinking says that you must have the end user experience in mind. So if we're going to create an educational system, if we're going to create these educational utopias within our schools as principals, it starts with you as the principal understanding what's my end user design, what's my end user experience, right? When I create that culture of high expectations for my staff, I want to make sure that when they come to work every day, they feel secure, right? Maslow talks about higher needs. He talks about, food, clothing, and shelter. They need to feel safe and put safety in that as well. Do we allow them to be able to, as you move up to Maslow, do we allow them to be able to meet and collaborate, to engage? Do we allow them to have opportunities for decision making? Or we just top down, this is the way, right? Do we allow them to make mistakes? Because we all know that you grow from mistakes. Because the goal for us as humans is to reach that self-actualization. So if you have those educators in your environment, in your culture, and they're growing, and you cultivate that growth with professional development, you cultivate that growth with respect and trust, and you start infusing your core values of what you think and your philosophy, and they start to buy into that because they're a part of that process, then you know that they will reach their self-actualization. And we hope that their self-actualization is consistent with the vision it is for your school, because we want them to be. Whether it's I need to learn more technology, or I need to do X, Y, and Z. So when you're designing that, now let's talk about our students as you're designing the end user experience. Let's talk about our students. We understand that our state has some laws in place, whether it's transgender guidelines, whether it's the bathroom reform for transgender, whether it's LGBTQ. So there's a lot of things that are going on in the state of New Jersey, a lot of policies that are put in place. So if we look in New Jersey, we understand we're a blue state. We understand just based off our policies, our value statements, we're progressive in the sense that we want an equitable society for all. Well, guess what? If that's the case, then how do you design and you create that? How do you make sure that when that student enters the classroom, that they feel comfortable, they're ready to sit in that seat? Because we understand if you're working in certain communities, there are factors beyond your control in these communities, right? We all want our kid to come in at an early age and to be able to be sitting down in there and ready to receive the information, right? Because if they're ready to receive the information, their mind is open. But if their mind is worrying about eating, poverty, bullying, if they're worrying about that, then guess what? We have to make sure that we provide those interventions, that we provide those supports, those comprehensive supports, so we can make sure we can prop them up. So now how do you go to the social justice piece of it? Is you're looking at your number, looking at your data and say, how many of my students of color are taking AP courses? How many of my students of color are doing X, Y, and Z, or making sure that they can take a class? So when you look at the stronger and fair, we at the Department of Education, we're defining equity as opportunity, access, and fairness. So we hope as you start to design your educational system in your schools, and you create that culture, you start designing with the end user in mind, your population. But then sometimes we need to make sure we need to give them extra, because we're the educators, we're the experts. We need to make sure that we get them programs that's going to get them, whether it's post-secondary success ready. We need to make sure that our students feel comfortable in class. Do they have an opportunity to vent? Do they have an opportunity, a space where they can go in and just kind of say, I had a bad day, and not be penalized for going in and having a bad day? Are we using grades as a weapon? Right? Are we giving our kids this and say, you know what? If you fail this test, you're done for the day because I'm going to give you a 0. So we need to make sure as we're looking at our educational system and looking within our classrooms that our design is exactly what we intend it to be. Because sometimes we think it is what it is. And unnecessarily they'll get a pulse, a check on that. So I need you, that's the climate, right? I need you to start checking the pulse, doing some things. Now, so as a Department of Education, these are some of the examples we're talking about design thinking, right? And I'm going to be talking about that a lot. This year, you're going to hear me say that. You're going to get, oh my God, he's talking about design thinking again. Because yes, I want you to understand. So another part of design thinking is also collaborating. Getting together with your peers and coming up with bold ideas. If you're doing the same thing you did last year, I'm sorry. Switch it up. Go big or go home. Our kids deserve it. Our educators deserve it. Try different things. If you have an idea, pilot. Design Thinking says pilot that program. See what it looks like. So when you do go full implementation, you understand some of the challenges you come across and some of those barriers, and that's where we move. So as we start to move and clearly define equity in action, you're going to start seeing that there was an intentional design. I call it intentionality of design, an intentional design of the work that we're doing. So I say the governor had an intentional design. You know, when you're looking at pre-K expansion, right, then that's the front end, getting the earliest and youngest of students in high quality education from the door. Then you look at the end, we talk about access to community college, free access to college if you make under $65,000 or less. See, that's equity plus, that's equity, that's moving, that's social justice. And in between, we're talking about creating computer science for all, making sure that our women, making sure that our minorities, underrepresented communities have an opportunity to gain those skills, to be in those fields that are driven by men or men-dominated fields. So, as I started when I talked earlier, I'm fortunate enough to be in a situation where I get to lead a department that a governor is supportive of educators. And he wants New Jersey not just to be the best, but he wants New Jersey to be the best for our students. So thank you very much for having me here. I hope to talk more about design thinking, equity in action. And remember this, as you go back to your respective schools, start having those conversations about those outcomes. Start thinking about the end user experience, not what you think it's going on, but what their experience is. Listen to them. Involve your staff. And I'm saying this, and I'm not preaching to the choir because I know the majority of you are doing these things because we wouldn't be number one if we weren't. But I'm just saying, be cognizant when we're talking about a strong and fair, we're talking about equity, start thinking about removing those barriers. Start thinking about social justice. And also start thinking about the people who you hire. Make sure it's a diverse workforce because, as I stated earlier, diversity, the strength of our economy and educational is our diverse staff and our deserved people. So thank you very much, and you have a great day.